Hei, klausītāji! Prieks, ka atradi šo īpašo digitālo brokastu podkāstu epizodi. Pavisam nesen, 12. māja digitālajās brokastīs ar DJ Rudu runājām par mākslīgā intelekta pielietojumu mūzikā, un tur mēs nospēlējām arī pāris īsos klipiņus ar komponistu un lietotņu izstrādātāju Deividu Viljamu Hērnu no apvienotās karalistes. Tagad tavam baudījumam oriģināla valodā pilnais intervijas ieraksts. Lai garšo!
Hello, David. Welcome on the radio show. Please introduce the listeners with yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is David William Hearn. I'm a composer and also an app developer that works on tools and technologies for other composers.
So AI has been a big trend. How has it changed the world of music in the last few months? What are some of the current trends and the future directions of AI music production?
Yeah, AI has really kind of blown up recently because it's got a lot of attention from a video that went around that had a cloned voice or a changed voice on it, which was sort of described as AI composition. To be honest with you, the music industry is in a constant state of flux and a constant state of evolution with technology. So in terms of how AI is impacting it, it's simply opening up more sort of opportunity streams for people or more opportunities for artists and composers and creators. So to give you a quick catch up of where we are right now with sort of the AI scene, there's always been a sort of algorithmic composition, or I say always, but since the early sort of 70s, it's been a way of getting computers to generate melodies. And that's increasing, and that's obviously gone a lot better. But usually there's still a human involved in the loop at some point. Then you have sort of AI-assisted stuff. So basically where a composer or a producer is using AI tools to help them with their kind of creative task. And I think this is the most exciting area for us today. There's a whole other area of sort of virtual musicians and virtual performances, which is where someone behind the scenes has worked quite hard to create something that looks completely sort of AI, if you will, but has actually had quite a lot of work done to it. And what's really interesting about that is that we're getting into the realm and sector of sort of virtual celebrity. So, maybe a singer or an artist that doesn't really exist and could be a number of different producers, a number of different artists. And that's super interesting and very exciting, actually, because it sort of globalizes the idea of an artist. So you could have, an artist in US English who's also very, very successful in Japanese. It's quite difficult to get a real human being that can speak every language in the world, but not so for an AI. And then there's things like outside of that, like in music education, there's a lot of really interesting things going on with AI. For me, one of the most interesting areas is actually the copyright and royalties, which is the sort of the licensing aspect of it. And the music industry, pretty much like most industries when you get to it, is effectively a licensing industry. So when it comes to the scene and how people are thinking about the scene in the last few months, it's very much around how do we monetize this? How do we license this as artists?
Just following up on that, the example of AI music that hit Latvia, I think like Wave, was the production between supposed Drake and supposed The Weeknd, Heart of My Sleeve song. So have you heard it first? And if so, what's your take on it? Is it actually an AI-produced song, or is it more like a marketing trick from the Universal Studios?
I don't know the origins, can't speak to the origins of it, of course. I have heard the song. It is, of course, an AI-assisted song. So the way these things work is that someone does a vocal that is an impression of Drake or an impression of The Weeknd or an impression of whoever you like. And then you can kind of deep fake it, so you can kind of morph your voice if it's already close. And the great thing about those artists and those similar artists is that they're kind of computery kind of sounding anyway, because they use a lot of auto-tune. It's quite monotonic. So, that's an example of what I would call AI-assisted composition, but it was brilliantly marketed and as such got a lot of attention.
So behind that, there is a person who is giving the lyrics. His name, his voice is changed. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so right now, if you wanted to sort of say that you were doing an AI-assisted sort of song in that vein, you could use a large language model like ChatGPT or something to create the lyrics in the style of another artist. And then you would create the music however you want to create the music. So you can drag and drop loops. That's been assisted from sort of AI, quote unquote, for a long time. But you don't need a lot of musical talent to be able to create those kind of backing tracks. There's a lot of production tools out there that'll help you. And then you you do an impression of that. So you rap it or whatever you want to do. And then you change your voice you change the timbre and tone of your voice using a neural network to, whatever you like, really. It can be Drake, it can be Ariana Grande, it can be whatever you want.
You were saying that the technology is being used for a long time, and then the artificial intelligence is also there for quite a long time. Have there been and will there be a problem for producers to balance this creativity and efficiency? Because, of course, it's much easier to just press a few buttons, maybe, and create great beats or lyrics. But, where's the creativity then? Will the temptation to use technology overshadow the creativity?
Temptation is the word, right? I think that's been the case in music production and music and songwriting. There's always been lazy music out there, in the sense of, to be really honest with you, I can grab my guitar and in 5 minutes write a really lazy pop song. It's not very hard. The difficulty comes when you actually try to do something new with those tools. So I think we see this with even in the art world with things like Midjourney and DALL-E, where you can just type in what you want to see and it will paint you a picture. And this is incredible, but it is something that everybody can do. It requires no skill. So automatically people are now looking for ways to be able to kind of incorporate that and use it in new creative ways. Humans are inherently creative. We have been since the dawn of time. Yeah, this is another tool, but much like pretty much any industry now, you can accelerate your job with technology, but it fundamentally doesn't necessarily replace the people, especially in the creative industry where we have a need and a desire and a human fundamental want to be creative and original. I think people will always seek that out. And sure, you've been able to create lazy music for a long time. This doesn't change that. There'll be those very tempted to type in, write me a hit #1 song. Whether or not other humans respond to it, there's a lot more that goes into a song or a lot more that goes into a piece of music than just the sort of the notes and the rests, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of personality and there's a lot of story that goes on behind the scenes.
So are there any songs after Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody that you could categorize as not lazy?
Yeah, he worked pretty hard on that one. I mean, there's fantastic music out there and there's also not fantastic music. I think that's going to be the way. And if anything, I remember when we were kids, there was a lot less choice, right? And I think that's really the other area that AI and music can kind of come together, is helping to sift out the lazy music from the really good music for you. And everyone's preferences are different. And a fascinating application of AI for me personally is the idea of hyper-personalization, or something that's beyond the fact that, you listen to some Ed Sheeran, you might like Snow Patrol, something that's hyper-personalized, that understands the time of day, your mood, maybe it understands a bit about what you're doing that day and can energize you or pump you up for exercise routines or whatever, automatically. It's a hyper-personalized music, which is very interesting.
So what I wanted to ask is that, like, for becoming a musician right now or artist, so you must get an IT degree then, as I understand, just to be on the top level, or you can do it without it.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing right now is the early days. It's the pre-ChatGPT movement for AI music. So we're in the point where you can do some crazy stuff with AI. It's not straightforward, and a computer science degree would help you out. But if we were having this conversation in a couple of years' time, it would be a plugin, basically, that you can just run in your DAW or your computer and just kind of say what you want and it will generate some stuff. That's definitely coming down the line. But do you know what I mean? There's so much more to music and songwriting and performance and collaboration with humans than just the act of typing in what you want to hear and pressing play. There's not much fun in that. And I think we'll always seek out the fun bit. So I'd still recommend you learn the piano and the guitar and how to write songs.
You mentioned that, for example, DALL-E as a program for creating wonderful pictures. So what are the trendiest AI tools that producers and artists use for music creation right now?
Yeah, I mean, so music creation, there's, like I said, there's several different aspects to it. There's sort of algorithmic composition, so you can kind of get in there with things like, I think it's called IVA or AIVA, which is a service that you can use that will literally write some music for you, and you get effectively a sort of MIDI file back that you can then customize and create sort of from there. So it gives you a great base. Amper is another program that does this, or another service that does this, which is really useful when you're creating, say, music for videos. You need a lot of background music for a YouTube clip or something like that. That's kind of a great service. There's some really interesting plugins that kind of use AI-assisted techniques to help you mix and master your records. So they can kind of analyze the frequencies in your production and say, hey, maybe you want to bring the drums down, bring the snare out, and kind of give you guidance on that. And sometimes they can even kind of do it for you. There's also really interesting use of AI here is to demix records. And there's some great software out there. Acon Digital have a great suite of tools called Acoustico, and in there you can unmix records. So you can take the vocals off an existing record, take the drums out of an existing record and reuse it. So that kind of opens up new opportunities for sampling. And then, of course, at the very end of the chain, you've got Lando doing great things with mastering with AI. So you can kind of get your music sounding a bit more beefy and radio ready.
So is there a place for an artist in the future? Or will it get so good that taking all of the music history that we have so far, we can just demix everything and just mix it back together? AI produced my voice and voila.
Yeah, well, but you are the artist in that case. If you've done it well and it sounds great and people want to listen to it, you're the artist. You know, I mean, you can say exactly the same thing about art and, the visual art. Like there was a piece of art hanging in the gallery here in London that was just a square of blue, just a solid piece of blue. And I was kind of looking at it going, I don't get it. But people get it, it speaks to some people. And that'll always be the case. There's so many preferences, there's so many choices and so many individual, decisions we make day in, day out, that if you've created a great piece of music, it doesn't really matter how you got there.
So you already mentioned about this, but how will the music industry be influenced by the development of interactive and adaptive music systems that can respond to the user feedback, emotions, and preferences in the real time, basically creating music on spot?
I think the most obvious application of that is in games or something that can change in a heartbeat. So something that requires a real-time kind of response. There's another interesting aspect in the visual world, which is happening at the moment. It's fringe research at the moment. It doesn't exist yet, but it's in the labs, which is being able to personalize content you watch with. So instead of showing you an advert for something like a box of cereal, the cereal will be embedded in the scene that you're watching. So maybe the hero character is eating a bowl of cereal in the background. You can see the logo, and it's going to be different for me. It's going to be a UK cereal versus for you, where you'll see a cereal that's in your supermarkets, right? So they're in real time, they're adapting what you're seeing be relevant to you. And in music, I think the same is somewhat true. You can influence people's behavior through what they're listening to. So there's been many studies done on this, but you can make people exercise harder if you play them the right tempo of music. Too fast is not good, too slow is not good. And you can sort of motivate or energize people in a certain way. So you could imagine a sort of soundtrack that is adapting to your sort of moods and your energies in real time, but also getting you to do stuff. I know this is a bit scary to talk about, but you can actually influence people's behavior through music. So you can subtly start to drop in songs that have lyrics about buying sneakers or whatever it might be. And this is an advertising source. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it's a very interesting area where, the TV program you've watched, you don't even know it, but the music soundtrack has been just subtly guiding you towards thinking, okay, well, maybe I want to go to McDonald's for lunch. Other restaurants are available.
You mentioned it as well at the very beginning, but what are some of the ethical and legal issues related to AI music production and distribution? You mentioned the ownership, but of course, I believe there is quite a lot of aspects that we will be facing or are facing now and will be facing in the near future.
Yeah, and again, just to sort of contextualize it a little bit, the music industry is in this constant state of learning about legal and licensing issues. It's a very grey area for most of its life. So, we have mechanical rights, and then Napster came along and that became very difficult to police, and then peer-to-peer and then Spotify and, all that changed the licensing model behind it. And sampling, even back in the 80s when you could suddenly start to sample other people's music, that became a really interesting area. So this is just the latest in a long installment of legal and sort of regulatory legislation that needs to be thought about and updated. For me as a composer, so to kind of give you some background, when you're a composer, especially if you're not a pop star, there's lots of ways you can make money if you're a pop star, but if you're a composer for, TV or film or advertising, then what you're really doing is you're selling the rights or the license to use that piece of music in whatever it is you're doing. And then someone has to collect that. So at the moment, the collection agencies or the licensing agencies rely on people being really honest. They rely on people writing down the music they've used on their TV show, and they fill it out in a spreadsheet, and then they send it to the Performing Rights Society in the UK or there's other collection agencies in other countries, and they pay a fee. And then that fee gets kind of collected and eventually paid to me. Every quarter or something, I get a payment from the PRS. And when you have maybe a future where kind of anyone can create music that is ambiguous in its origin. So, who's really created this? Has the AI created this? Have I created it because I prompted the AI to create it? That's an ongoing sort of area of grayness, because it might have used a lot of inspiration from somebody else. I could say, write a piece of music in the style of Chopin. And in that case, you're okay, because Chopin's pretty dead, so he's not going to complain. But it gets much more grey if you say, write a piece of music in the style of Ed Sheeran or something like that, because then this is passing off and that gets into that legal territory of sort of doing an impression and parody even. Then you get even deeper into rights and licensing issues when you get individual like artists that can change their voice to another artist. So who owns the voice rights? This has been solved in print and in video because there are image rights. You can sell your image and I don't need to be present for a photo shoot and you can stick my face on a can of cola or something. And you can, as long as you pay me, if you've licensed my image. The same is not true currently for voice. So whoever cracks the voice rights industry is onto a lot of money. If you're a lawyer out there, I would recommend looking at that.
So we're talking about AI coming into music, people taking advantage of it. What's next big thing? Take a wild guess. I don't know how far you want to go, but like, what's after this when this is normal?
In music or just in general?
In music.
Well, I think we'll just see a lot more virtual. I think the virtual artists is going to be a real thing because it combines the music with other things, with all the kind of technology that's going on with image generation, video generation. And if you can have an artist that can generate its own music and it has its own personality and you can interact with, then this thing can live on everyone's phone, in everyone's augmented reality glasses or headsets. You can have a relationship with this artist in a way that isn't possible with a human artist. And I think that's going to be incredibly big business in the future.
So thank you, David, for this interview. It was an amazing journey into the trendiest questions about artificial intelligence in music. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Aha! Paldies, ka noklausījies mūs līdz galam!
Ja patika, uzspied like, atstāj komentāru vai padalies ar draugiem.
Un nobauda arī citas epizodes, kā arī seko mums, lai nepalaist garām savu iknedēļas tehnoloģiju ziņu devu.